Hello, everyone, and welcome to VMblog's VMworld 2020 digital coverage. Today, we're excited to have with us an industry expert, Joe Ferguson, who happens to be a cloud sales engineer over at Clumio. Joe, it's great to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me today.
So let's jump right in and kick things off. If you could, just give us a quick overview of the company.
Sure, yeah. So Clumio was founded in October 2017, and the core purpose behind the vision of the company is to utilize public cloud and resources and the extensibility of the public cloud to build a platform that essentially fundamentally disrupts the data backup and recovery market as we know it today. And there's a couple key drivers that were set that in motion. One of them being the idea that the architectures today are moving very steadily away from an on-prem only focus and shifting out into public cloud, as well as the adoption of SaaS applications. And there are gaps in that protection process as these designs move outward. The way that we've fundamentally known data protection to exist on-prem doesn't exist in the same way in the public cloud, nor should it. Really, the resource utilization and the optimizations and the design elements need to be fundamentally different because you're designing for different elements, and really you're designing more around infrastructure that you are using and paying on a metered service basis, rather than having a static architecture that's built that you own, that you can run 24/7. So not only that, but the idea that utilizing the public cloud to build a platform allowed Clumio to actually approach the problem in a fundamentally different way, and build and design a backup and recovery architecture that is more stateless, more secure, more scalable than what could meet the needs in your traditional software hardware model that was generally run on-prem. So a lot of the efforts have been built in to provide a better sense of inclusivity for all workloads, but all managed under a single platform.
Well, thanks for that overview of the company. Obviously, we're here celebrating VMworld, which this year has become a digital event. I just wanted to get your thoughts on, how do you feel about the digital events versus the physical traditional trade shows that we're used to?
It's different. It follows a trend, I think, or it's accelerating a trend that I've been seeing where we're digitizing more content anyways. Even at the trade show last year in the event, right? There was a lot of effort to reduce handouts and things of that nature. So it became a much more digitally combined event anyways. I think we miss a lot the element of personal interaction. And I think that's a big gap that we're seeing today. But it's been interesting to see, creative ways to try to overcome that limitation that exists today. And, so fundamentally, it's definitely, it's strange, it's different. But I think it's encouraging to see the effort of everybody to still maintain active engagement and involvement and keep it as personal as possible.
And Joe, another change that we've, recently had to face is this shift to everybody working from home. What are your thoughts on this, and how has it changed your company?
I think we've seen it in two different ways. So internally, there hasn't been a ton of change for us as a cloud startup company, right? Utilizing a lot of native cloud services, and we're fairly dispersed internally as an engineering organization. And so that hasn't shifted too much for us. I think the biggest change has been really the impact of the direct sales organization and our ability to get in front of people. But again, it's this idea of using creativeness to try to overcome some of those obstacles. And I think it's been, again, encouraging to see, not only from our end, but even the customer end, this willingness to show our face on the screens a little bit more, in absence of being face to face. Externally, we've seen a lot of change. And I think one of the things that's been interesting to watch is that the last 9 months has been talked about in some ways as a catalyst for this move to public cloud. And I'm not sure that that was the event that really drove it. I think what happened, though, is it put a magnifying glass on something that was already well underway. This idea of moving applications into public cloud whenever possible. And one of the things that we know to be true is that software as a service is a great first cloud move. And the idea that you're walking into an optimized infrastructure ready built, and it becomes very results oriented for the customer. For any application that's core to running a business, but isn't providing necessarily a distinct competitive advantage in your industry, the question becomes, do you really want to spend the people, effort, and time to operate and own those infrastructures to run that application? Or does it make sense to really just sign up for a results-based service where you get the same, if not better, results, but you're spending no time, right? And you're also not physically interacting with anything anymore. So this idea that you can instantaneously get results from a software as a service solution versus a typical on-prem hardware software model where you're waiting for, equipment to ship, you've got rack and power and cooling and everything like that. And then it's all the care and feeding around it. So we've seen an accelerated interest in our platform because of that. But additionally, too, I think with the acceleration of people working from home, or sort of the forced idea that people are now working remotely, we were already seeing a rise in ransomware attacks and trying to take advantage of vulnerabilities, and that's only increased. And so, the service of what we deliver is naturally built to provide this secure air-gap solution for customers' data, and in a no-touch approach. And so it's been a natural response for people to start looking more at solutions like Clumio, not only from a security perspective, but just from an ease of use and deployment, and the lack of care and feeding, and the lack of people, human resources that they need to apply towards it, right? And they can redirect those resources to things that are more valuable to the core business competitive advantage.
And since we're here talking about VMworld, maybe you can tell us how your company partners together with VMware.
Sure. Yeah, I think we see VMware as a core integration into the platform. We are VMware partner ready for VMware Cloud on AWS. We're also vSAN ready. And I think that really proves, one, that we're following technical standards of integration. We can fully support workloads that run inside of these environments. But additionally, I think from an engineering perspective, a lot of our integrations are built right into the framework of what VMware brings to the table. And I think the more tightly you can integrate a solution into native tool sets within the application, it becomes much smoother and better experience overall, because the compatibility is just more naturally aligned. So we see this as a very core part of what we're delivering today. And we're taking advantage of a lot of the VMware capabilities inside of that too. Specifically, though, we have a kind of a unique implementation with VMC, VMware Cloud and AWS, that's different from other solutions out there. And we can talk a little bit more about that inside of the technical deep dive.
Yeah, I guess why don't we do that? If can you kind of give more of a deep dive into what your company is offering, the technology, and maybe tell us a little bit about how it's unique or differentiated in the marketplace?
Sure. So Clumio is the only enterprise software as a service company that can deliver data protection, backup, and recovery across private cloud, public cloud, and SaaS applications in a single platform. we're fundamentally differentiated in three ways. The idea of software as a service and what that brings, this idea of universal coverage of your data without having to deploy multiple products, and this idea that we've up-leveled the security posture of what data backup and recovery should look like. If we talk about the value of software as a service, it plays itself out in a number of different ways. The first is that there is no hardware or software to manage anymore. You're not buying infrastructure. And the purchase of actual physical hardware and infrastructure dictates a lot of your buying mentality in some ways, right? Because there's economies of scale, and because you're physically putting in software and hardware, you want to try to get it right up front. So you're always trying to analyze where the business is going to go 3 years from now or 5 years from now, and you're trying to implement a solution that can adapt and change to unknown needs, essentially. And then once you're implementing that, you have the constant care and feeding and oversight, right? There's patching, there's tuning, there's optimization, there's troubleshooting. With software as a service, you have the ability, one, to sign up instantaneously. So if we were interested in using Clumio and signing up right now, I could have you onboarded and backing up data within 20 minutes from now, and we would never leave the seats we're in. And that's a very powerful tool. And so, the idea that you can get this level of instant gratification out of the service through SaaS, but it also brings to the equation this idea of instant scalability. And it creates a very organic consumption model for our customers. So you can start out backing up 20% of your environment today. And as we prove success to you, you can turn around tomorrow and back up 75% of your environment. Right? The service is designed to scale on the demand of the customer. And so from the customer perspective, it becomes very much of a, you think and you do, right? You don't have to plan, you don't have to alter, you don't have to change. And a lot of times when you're buying physical infrastructures, a way to move outside of those or to expand them can be complicated, right? Because they're designed to work together in certain ways and they deliver a certain result. And sometimes altering that isn't always the easiest thing. But with software as a service, you're literally just signing up to use the platform and then we'll scale. So you don't have to design for peak workloads. You don't have to design for growth and change. You can consume what you're paying for today. It's very in line, the cost model between utilization and cost. And it allows customers to really increment their way into the service. I mean, we certainly have customers that go all in from day one. But the value is, especially for customers that are on a cloud journey for, sometime over the next 5 years, do they really want to continue buying infrastructure to support an on-prem data center that may be going away or shifting, right? So if you're moving from VMware to VMware Cloud, you don't need all the on-prem hardware anymore. And so we offer them an opportunity even mid-cycle to start offloading some of their data protection into Clumio in advance and in preparation for a full-scale move. And we can effectively protect that data while it's on-prem, and then as it moves into a public cloud resource, we can just maintain the protection still. So you get a continuous coverage model, and you start to remove your reliance on hardware and software inside of the data center to achieve the end results. SaaS really plays itself out as a core differentiator for us. The second idea of this ubiquity model, where we're going to protect your data no matter where it lives, really gives the customers flexibility to make decisions that are right for them, but have that continuation of coverage no matter where they move that data to. But doing it within a single platform, not having to deploy multiple product sets into different endpoints to apply protection there. I think that's one of the things that most solutions struggle with today is they're very focused on an endpoint design, even if your data center is your endpoint, but they are installing physical devices there that are focused on that environment only, and they don't extend out into the other geographical locations or virtual locations where data resides for them. And so if we can centralize the control plane and create data planes that are accessible for all these different endpoints per se, now you have a nice consolidated approach. You can apply a single policy structure across all these different endpoints, and have one single engine that's driving compliance across the organization, no matter how it has grown or what it looks like. And so it gives you the flexibility that you know that you are in one design today and this will change, and I've got something that will meet the needs. I think the third, and probably one of the things that we lead with most, is around security and our security posture. And when you're asking customers to trust Clumio with your data, we have to present a very secure environment and gain a lot of that customer trust. And one of the advantages we have in that space is that we were brand new 3 years ago. And so as we built the platform, we had a very security first mindset from day one. And so we were able to build in all these elements. And in fact, last year, we had our public launch in summertime and walked into VMworld, and we won Best in Show, not just in the data protection category, but across all 5 categories. And one of the main pieces of feedback that we received is this idea that we built security into everything we do. And I think it changes the conversation from just backup and recovery into highly secure backup and recovery. And I think that's really important today, especially with the advancement of ransomware and the sophistication and the frequency of those attacks. You really need to have a sense of this gold copy of your data that's air-gapped and secured from those types of events. And one of the things that we built into the core of the platform is the fact that every piece of data that we back up is air-gapped and secured. And we protect it not only from external intrusion, but also we protect the data from the customers themselves. And the reason why that's important is a lot of attacks in environments happen because people gain privileged rights to users' accounts. And so if you're running software on a server with direct access to the data in your storage and the metadata, and I come in and take advantage or gain access to a credential that has administrator privileges, I have access to the data path. I can encrypt it, I can delete it, I have access to the metadata, right? And so from a recoverability perspective, ransomware tends to focus its blast radius on non-recoverability. And so the idea that backup targets are a great part of that picture for them to maximize the impact, we remove that. And so not only are we keeping the data safe and secure, but we also are maintaining an operational environment that you can recover from. And so if your entire logical infrastructure is compromised, you still have a functional environment that you can recover from. And the fact that we give flexibility around where you can recover to provides, again, more flexibility, more choices for the customer. And I think at the end of the day, right, you can only, you look at ransomware in a couple different stages, right? When we're really focused on the recoverability aspect. We're not necessarily, mitigating an attack, but we're giving that insurance policy to the customers that say, if this does happen, you can ensure that the data is protected with Clumio. And so those are the 3 biggest things that we really talk about, right? The advantages of software as a service and what it can bring. The idea that you can create protection for your data no matter where it lives. And the idea that we're going to be a highly secure backup and recovery environment. And when you put all those together, it becomes a pretty compelling story overall.
So normally at this time of year during VMworld, a lot of companies are releasing new product updates or new features to their product. Is there anything that Clumio has recently done or new updates to your product?
There's some really exciting things that are going on. One of the things that I've really appreciated seeing in support of a software as a service application or a platform versus my 20 years of supporting on-prem hardware and software solutions is the pace of innovation. I see us innovating at 4 to 5x the rate that hardware companies innovate at, simply because the pathway to doing it, right, it's a very centralized architecture where we keep just optimizing for one thing overall. One of the really unique things that we're bringing to market in the process right now is this idea of backing up databases independent of the database engine. So really freeing the database or the data from the database so that you could, and this really applies in value and long-term retention, where, if you're backing up an instance of Postgres SQL 9, right? And 5 years from now, you need to recover data around that. There's challenges, finding the right version, finding a supported code that you can actually launch and run the backup from to go and get the data back. And so what we've built into this platform is this idea of removing the data from the database and allowing database owners to actually query the data right outside of the backup or right inside of the backup without having to do a restore of the entire database instance. And so unlocking that allows us to create a consolidation between on-prem, VMware Cloud, AWS native public cloud, Azure public cloud, and bring them all together and say the data is the most important thing. And so if you have, it really essentially allows them to have less reliance on the engine itself and more access to the data more quickly, more easily. And at the end of the day, this idea that backup and recovery is an entry point for us. We're really building a data management platform. And so once we can consolidate all the data into single locations for our customers, this idea of secondary use cases around data becomes real because we're not limited by CPU and memory in the public cloud or storage spindles, right? We have the option to design ways to access data in different ways, right? So it's not just built around sequential ingress and egress of data from a backup recovery perspective, but we can be equally as performant and scalable in small block queries. And so everything we're building around databases today is going to, play into this idea of a larger data management platform. So it'll be interesting to watch or watch the space for new announcements around SQL Server specifically. Inside of on-prem, Azure, AWS.
And Joe, that's great. Thanks for that information. I'm a visual guy like many of our audience members. Is there anything that you can show, some screens or a quick demo of what the product actually looks like?
Sure. Yeah, hang on a second. Let me share a screen. I'll show you the experience a user would have inside of the UI.
Okay.
I think the purpose would be to show the value of instant connectivity and usability of the platform. So the user experience, you can see my screen?
Yeah.
So the user experience is really dictated by interaction with our user interface. And so what you can see is that we've got a number of data sources that we can protect. The VMware data source includes VMware Cloud on AWS as well. And then the single policy engine and some reporting and some settings around security. But I wanted to show two things. One, how easy it is to onboard into the service itself, and also the compatibility and integration between on-prem VMware and VMware Cloud. And so as a customer, if you wanted to add VMware to Clumio protection, you come into the VMware data source and you connect to a new vCenter. And simply, you're just giving an IP address of your vCenter, and you're saying whether this is on-prem or whether this is VMware Cloud on AWS. And when you click Next, Clumio provides a stateless vApp in the form of an OVA and a security token. So the process at this point is to deploy that OVA, and you apply the security token to it inside of vCenter, and you power it on, you give it network credentials, and you launch it, and then you are done, right? So in a matter of a few minutes of a deployment, you basically onboard into Clumio as a service. What happens next is that Cloud Connector will actually register itself with Clumio, and it's a stateless vApp. And so it really is just a shell of a VM. And the first thing it does when it connects to Clumio is to pull down a few containers that essentially fills out its capabilities. And one is, a heartbeat to let us know it's alive. There's another container that's responsible for inventory of the environment and any inventory changes. And then there's a third container that really focuses on the data orchestration, right? Orchestrating the data movement from on-prem into the cloud. The nice piece of this design is that if that cloud connector, if those containers go out of current state, right, they become n-1, the cloud connector can just simply drop and pull a new one from Clumio's Bitbucket. And so that's patching, right? It's self-maintaining, no customer involvement. You can get rid of Patch Tuesdays, essentially. And it's always staying current, right? The advantage of the service is that we're building all the features and functionality into a single platform. So when you log in, you're always logging into the most current version of the platform. And the cloud connectors maintain their currency themselves. So once, a few minutes after it connects, it will have inventoried your entire environment for you. And so you can come in and you can see essentially the objects broken out hierarchically at the highest level by clusters and hosts, and then by VM folders, by tags, or by the specific VMs themselves. And we can apply policies at any one of these layers. We really like tags because not only does it align with automation through vRealize deployments, where you're tagging machines and they can automatically adapt to a created policy and become protected. But it's also the similar methodology that's being used in public cloud for identification of machines as well. So process-wise, it transfers over really well. So once you've applied a policy, then we're going to back up these machines inside of the vCenter. Now, the methodology, so it's all VMware integrated. So we're making V80P calls to create a snapshot SCSI hot add of a VM to our cloud connector. We also have the ability to do NBD as well, but our preference is SCSI hot add. And then we are going to use QCDA calls inside of VMware to get the unique block information of that VM. And we'll consistently recall that information to understand change blocks as we continue to protect that VM. And so the first backup is going to be a full seed of the VM, and then we're going to do an incremental forever strategy afterwards. But we're going to reduce data along the way. So as we inspect the data on the source side, we do source side data reduction through compression, through data deduplication. And then we're also going to encrypt the data prior to sending it to Clumio. But the nice thing about the source side data reduction is that it's global throughout the service. So if you've got multiple sites, if you've got VMC and VMware, and you're backing them both up to Clumio, or you've got multiple data centers, you're going to get deduplication across everything. So it's not localized to that specific data center. It's going to spread across the entire service. So there's a lot of network efficiency built in. Now, we really want customers, once they sign up and create the policies and apply them to the data sources, to be able to just walk away, right? And we'll send them reports on how the service is doing. The only time we want them to interact with the service is when they want to restore or recall data. And there's a number of different things that you can do around this. So you can do basically a simple search for a file across all the backups for a machine, or you can actually go into a calendar history and look at specific date and times and either browse and restore files and folders from that, or restore the full VM. And there's a few interesting things that we do around full VM restores. So if we switch to advanced mode, you can see that any vCenter that's registered with the platform can be a target to restore to. So I can back up this VM directly from my on-prem data center and restore it right into my software-defined data center in VMware Cloud. Nothing else that is needed to do. It's going to natively just install right back inside of it. So there's a number of options that we provide there. You also have the ability to restore to a new VM or overwrite the source VM. And if you're overwriting source VM, we actually allow you to have an option where you can clone the source VM to create a backup of it in case there's some sort of mistake or accidental restore, right? You intended to do something, but it really wasn't what you intended to do. So we have a backup plan for you on that as well. Another cool piece of intelligence that we brought into the platform is this idea of rapid recovery. And ultimately what rapid recovery is essentially this idea of reverse change block tracking. So if you have a full VM that is not powering on, it's corrupt, right? It still exists in inventory, but you need to conduct a full restore. And when you request a full restore from Clumio, we essentially will immediately take a look at the last backup, compare it to the bitmap on the existing VM, and only send the change blocks back. And so while you may have requested a full terabyte restore, we could actually get that machine on and running in a matter of just sending gigabytes over the wire. And so what we've seen is this exponential reduction in time for recovery by using this methodology. And so again, it's the power of public cloud allows us to do a number of things differently. And they manifest themselves in the operation and the user experience of the service itself. So that was a brief demonstration. I just wanted to show that you can onboard into the service in literally 15 minutes or less, and that would create a lot of flexibility in what you can do as far as the data once it is inside of Clumio. And you have full ability to restore not only on-prem, but straight into VMC and vice versa. And we will track that VM as it moves throughout the environments. So hopefully that gives you a good sense of what the platform can do around VMware. And that would be the demonstration.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, thanks for that great demo. Where can people go if they want to find out more information about Clumio and some of the stuff we discussed today?
www.clumio.com. We've got a number of videos, some really good blog posts out there that really express the value of what Clumio is doing, not only from a high level, but also really gets down into the detail around how the technology is built and what we can provide.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having us. We really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more from our cloud technology partners, please hit the like button and subscribe. And if you want to get notified next time we post a video, please hit the subscribe and the bell notification. Very important.